today we're going to start with introduction to anatomy. Introduction to anatomy. So today is so what is the definition of anatomy? Before we define anatomy in the Greek word, we call it the anatom, meaning ana, up, tome, cutting. So we are learning anatomy in order to dissect. So anatomy deals with dissection. So why we are trying to learn anatomy, the main product is to know about the human body, and so that we medical doctors or medical related field can dissect the human body. Let's start with the definition of anatomy. So what is anatomy? It is the science. Anatomy is the science that studies the internal and external structures. Remember, the internal and external structures and the shape of the body parts and their relationship with one another. So anatomy is the science that deals with the study of the internal and external structures and the shape of the body parts and their relationship with one another. So we are going to use this formula, which is BOS. Anatomy is the study of the body structures. That is just the formula BOS, the study of the body, the B of the structures, both the internal and external structures and shape of the body, and in relationship to one another. So the study of anatomy can be subdivided into so many fields. So first, let's start with the microscopic anatomy, or we call it the histology. So what is microscopic anatomy? This is the science or structures that deals with the human body with the aid of microscope. So whenever you see a human being or set or group of people that is studying anatomy with the aid of microscope, we call it histology or microscopic anatomy. So we have the word microscopic anatomy or gross anatomy. So the is gross anatomy we are going to focus on. So the word microscopic anatomy or gross anatomy is the study of human body with the naked eyes. So those parts of the body you can see without the aid of microscope, we call it the gross anatomy or microscopic anatomy. So we have developmental anatomy stroke or slash embryology. Take note, developmental anatomy and embryology are not the same, but the study of the growing of embryo or fetus. So the difference between developmental anatomy and embryology is there's a difference, but we join them together because they are related. So embryology deals with the study of an individual in his uterine life cycle, in the uterus or in the mother womb. Whenever you're studying anatomy, the unborn child, or whenever you're studying an individual or organism before birth, which we call natal, we call it embryology. But from birth, immediately the baby is out of the human body or the womb, we now call it developmental anatomy. So we have radiological anatomy, the study of the bodily structure using radiography and other imaging techniques or method. We also have the applied anatomy, the practical application knowledge to diagnose and treatment. So whenever we are diagnosing and we are treating, we call it applied anatomy. So but for you to understand this word applied anatomy, you must have understood anatomy. So you have the surgical anatomy, the study of the anatomical structures in reference to the surgical diagnosis and treatment. Surgical diagnosis and treatment, that is the main keyword. So we have the gross sectional anatomy. So what are the gross sectional anatomy? Studying the human body through a transverse cut or structures. Through a transverse cut or structures. That's what we call the developmental anatomy. Okay, the main approaches to study anatomy. So our next subheading is the main approaches to study anatomy. So first is the systematic anatomy. So there are main approaches you have to use to study anatomy, meaning there are main key points. There are ways you don't just study anatomy. There are ways you study anatomy. The first we have is systematic anatomy. This is a process by which we study anatomy in systemic format. Example, we have the digestive system, we have the respiratory system, we have the excretory system and the rest in our body. So whenever you are studying anatomy based on system, the skeletal system, whenever studying anatomy based on system, we call it systematic anatomy. So we have the regional anatomy, which is also known as the topographic anatomy. So the regional anatomy is the study of a particular region, a particular point or a particular area in the body. Example, we have the upper limbs. So whenever you are studying a particular region in that upper limbs, example, we have the hand. So whenever you are studying about the hand, in that upper limbs, we now call it what? Regional anatomy, the studying of a particular area of a body. We have the clinical anatomy. This most times do with application of anatomy, where you see it clinically, where you are going to apply anatomy. We now have the comparative anatomy. I hope something is coming to your head. So when we talk about the comparative anatomy, we are comparing the difference between the anatomical structure of a group of organisms and the difference of the anatomical structure of another group of organisms. So comparative anatomy, we are reading and we are comparing. Example, what is the difference between the anatomical structures of the upper limbs and the anatomical structures of the lower limbs? We are comparing the difference between the skeletal system of human being with the skeletal system of other organisms. Of So comparative anatomy, we are comparing and constructing. That's the difference between systematic, regional anatomy and clinical anatomy. So in recap or in summary, systematic anatomy studying anatomy in systemic region, studying anatomy system by system, regional anatomy studying a particular area in the body, which also known as the topographic anatomy. Clinical anatomy, this use the application of anatomy in clinicals. You're going to apply what you know or the knowledge in clinicals. So we have the comparative anatomy. This is comparing anatomy. This is the study of anatomy in order to compare and construct. Now we have the anatomical terminology.